Welcome to another episode of The Mixtape with Scott, a podcast devoted to becoming an oral history of the last 50 years of economics through the personal stories of economists, authors, and scientists. I am your host, Dr. Scott Cunningham. Today, we're journeying to Central Europe, tracing the steps of Gábor Békés, an assistant professor at the Central European University in Austria. Gábor's fascinating journey begins in Hungary, a country in the throes of communist rule during his early formative years. Picture a young, curious Gábor grappling with the implications of a transitioning regime where economics textbooks were in a state of flux, mirroring the socio-political transformations around him. And that's about what I heard today. Gábor shares his unique experiences navigating a rapidly changing educational landscape and in a rapidly changing country and a rapidly changing Europe, and how it shaped his research interests in economic geography and international economics. His stories not only offer a glimpse into his personal growth, but also the evolution of economic thought in this transitioning society. But our conversation didn't stop there. We dove into his recent magnum opus, a book he co-authored with the late Gábor Kézdi, titled Data Analysis for Business, Economics, and Policy, published by Cambridge Press. It came out in mid-2021. It's a tour de force in data science and econometrics, glossy, visually stunning guide that takes readers on a journey from the foundations of data analysis to the complexities of machine learning, regression, and in the end, causal inference. I often compare this book to Dennis Rodman, known to many as the second best player in basketball. In a world saturated with Michael Jordans, this book stands out as the data Rodman of data science, indispensable, unique, offering a perspective you won't find elsewhere. It won't oftentimes be the main textbook in your class, but it will probably be the assigned readings. And even if it isn't, you need to make it so. While my own book delves into the weeds of causal inference, Gábor's covers everything. This is a book that I really see as essential for kind of growing and maturing as an empiricist, no matter what field you're in. So join me today as we explore the life, work, and insights of Gábor Békés, a man whose journey has as much to teach us about resilience and adaptivity as his book does about data analysis. It's a conversation I thoroughly enjoyed, and I hope you will too. So get comfortable. Let's dive in. Well, it is my pleasure to have on the podcast today the author of a new book, Data Analysis for Business, Economics, and Policy, Gábor Békés. I said it wrong. How do I say it?
It's Gábor Békés, but that was close enough.
Gábor Békés with Gábor Kézdi as the co-author that has just come out, and I'm super excited to get to talk to Gábor. So Gábor, could you, for the sake of the listener, tell us your name, your job title, and who pays your paycheck?
So my name is Gábor Békés. I'm an assistant professor at the Central European University in Vienna, Austria. I'm also a researcher at the Hungarian Institute of Economics.
Okay, great. What time is it over there?
So this is just 10 past 5.
10 past 5. Okay, it's 10 a.m. here. Great. All right, so let's start with an icebreaker. Can you share me a memorable anecdote or tradition from your childhood that has influenced your journey and stays with you?
So I think it's not a ritual, but it's something that started me to think about not necessarily economics, but like, business and the world outside. So, I grew up when Hungary was still a socialist country, so in the 80s. And we had a cottage at the countryside, and the next door neighbor, so this is like 87, 88. So our next door neighbor worked at the first commercial bank that was allowed to operate, behind the Iron Curtain.
Oh, wow.
And he would just tell stories about the real world and, tell stories about capitalism, as it were, and business. And it was just super exciting, right? So I was like, 14, and this guy was just really telling interesting stories. And so at that time, I really wanted to work in finance. And I still remember it because, my parents are, coming from a very different background. So it's not really business or economics. They were really artists. And so this was like really something very new.
What'd you notice? What was it? What were you curious about watching this unfold?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it was just I think some sense freedom, right? So that was the first capitalist bank, operating. I think the second was kind of the global nature of it, right? So foreigners and connections, and I think finance, was pretty interesting, not in socialism, but like in general when you first hear about it. So I think that was actually pretty. I often think back. I don't know if that made me the economist, but certainly that started me to get interested in business and economics and finance.
Well, how old were you when it was no longer a communist country?
16.
Oh, wow. So what was it like? What was it like those first 16 years?
I mean, so Hungary at that time was kind of the most liberal country in the East. So the 80s were, as a child, was not like terribly restrictive. It was not like Eastern Germany. And really, I mean, your first conscious political stuff is really the change, right? So you don't really know when you're 12 or 13, you don't really think about politics. You see, maybe your parents watch the news and there is some discussion, but it's not more than noise. And then as you kind of grow up in high school, this is really kind of around the change, 89, 90, the first free elections, right? So I was in high school when the first free elections happened, and then I was, on the streets, giving away leaflets and sort of stuff. So that was the first thing that I kind of consciously were doing in outside. So the elections and the change. And
what kind of conversations were you and your parents, or that you were noticing your parents having with each other?
So, I mean, not necessarily with each other, but I think a crucial discussion, again, that's going to sound pretty relevant, is how you behave in an autocracy. How far are you willing to collaborate with the power that you hate? How much do you have to collaborate, to make ends meet? The double speak, that was going on during socialism, and that's kind of going on in many countries now. And I think this idea of collaboration with the power that you hate, that is not like Russia type of oppression, but still a non-democratic power. How you do that? I think that was something that I've been thinking about quite a bit. And
what was so to an American or a European that's never lived in a communist country, like give me an example of something that's just like an ordinary thing that you just hated, that you no longer kind of experience now.
I can't really tell you. I mean, I don't remember as a child that there was something that I, as 14-year-old, that was for me personally, something that I could feel. Probably the inability to go to West, right? So that it was difficult to go to West. So I think travel was something that you would feel, right? If I know most Americans don't have a passport, or many Americans don't have a passport. But especially in Europe, the inability to travel, if you're a small landlocked country, then that's pretty essential.
Right.
Right. So imagine you couldn't go out of Wisconsin, and that was it. Unless unless you asked for a special passport, and then you could go to West like every whatever years, but that was only after the mid 80s. So up until the mid 80s, it was pretty hard. It's not impossible, but pretty hard. So when I remember our first family holiday in like 88 or 89 to Italy. That was pretty hard to organize, and it was really great. The first, the taste of freedom.
Wow. Well, so tell me about your parents. What did they do for a living when you were a little kid?
All right. So my mother, she was a violinist, and my father, he was a writer, and he also worked for the national TV, mostly on like children and young adult programs.
Was he? Did he write fiction? He wrote.
Yeah, fiction. Yeah.
He wrote for the television, but did he write?
And also books, right?
He also wrote books.
Yeah.
Wow. What was his name?
József.
Huh.
That's Joseph.
Was he a well-known author?
So I think he was not a well-known author, but his name was well known through television because he worked on 100 plus films and TV series. Some of them are really well known, mostly again for like a younger audience. But one thing that was actually special during socialism is that actually there was a lot of quality program for young people.
Really?
On TV, yeah. Yeah, so I think that
and that was part of your, is that what, I'm just curious, why would that even be the case?
I have no idea.
There was a real investment by the Hungarian.
For some reason this was the case in all over, I think, Eastern Europe, so not only in Hungary. And that kind of faded away in the 90s, so that must have been something special. I think it was not commercially super interesting, but for some reason that was the case. I really don't know why.
Well, so what were your kind of aspirations or interests when you were in grade school? When you were like, maybe like up until like 9 or 10 years old, what kind of stuff did you like?
I don't have a clue. I don't remember.
You don't remember?
I like swimming, so I certainly like swimming.
Yeah.
I still like that. Riding the bike and swimming. I think this is something I like for sure. I don't know. I mean, later on, I know, but up until like high school, I liked math, but like I was okay, but not like. I mean, in primary school, I thought I was very good.
Yeah.
And then around 12, 13, I realized I'm okay, but not like very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember that realization.
Did you notice any creative, any like net looking back, given these two creative parents? Do you notice that as you were a kid, you were probably pretty creative?
So again, that was more like in high school, that basically I started to direct all the class drama presentations. So I then that I've been kind of writing stuff and doing theater. So in high school, that was like the main thing. And that's, so when you ask me what I remember that I really liked, and I think doing theater as that I remember from my childhood as something that I really, really liked.
What did you like about it? When did that happen? That was in high school?
I think that happened right when the first year of high school. So when I was like 15. And I liked everything. I liked the creative process. I think I like directing people, which sounds, I guess, a bit weird, but I did like it. I guess I enjoyed that people, I don't know, liked our production. So there was something extrovert about that. And I did like theater. I still like theater a lot. Right. So there's something about theater beyond me being part of it that I did like and I do like now.
What sort of playwrights did you like? Did you like any American playwrights that I would have heard of?
Yeah, I mean, O'Neill, Miller. I mean, I remember O'Neill, liking him a lot, but I think I don't know how much it's true in Europe, but you get to like a lot of the Russians, which I still do. Yeah.
So when you graduate from high school, what would your teachers have said, as you're graduating? What would they have said? They would have said, I think this is what Gábor is going to end up doing.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think so. I think I was good in like math, history, and maybe language. So I think they thought I would do, because I was interested in like diplomacy and European Union.
Right.
So I think that was kind of in the cards, some kind of foreign policy or public policy, but at the EU level thing.
Okay.
That was I did like a model, youth parliament, European Parliament model thing in the early years of college. that I also liked a lot. But I also realized at some point that I'm not interested in politics, like doing
Oh,
politics.
really? You realized that in college?
Yeah. Did I like it? I'm interested in it, but like that's not something I want to do.
So you were interested in policy, not politics, or not?
Yes,
None
exactly. No, I was interested in policy. I was interested in policy, not the politics part.
How can you tell? Like, so what happens? You like as a kid, you're like sorting in, you're just saying they're kind of like the same thing, but then you got into it. How would you articulate what you liked and didn't like and what exactly happened?
I mean, I guess I loved the European Youth Parliament. So I really enjoyed like this getting together international crowd and this debating policies. And, that's, I started it when I was, actually, I realized I started in high school. So that was like also 16. And so I like that. And then, you get to see more of politics, right? Politics was also new to Hungary, right? So that was also new to me, how politics is done. And then in the beginning, you have all kind of this naivete about this. And then at some point, if you realize it's like dirty and you have to have like a hard skin and all that. And I realized I'm not that.
So when did you get your so I have this question here. Let me just read it. So, you might say there's like, for the sake of argument, there's 3 separate ways that a person gets initial exposure to economics: classes, people, and books. And so I wanted to kind of go one by one. What was your first exposure to economics through a class?
So I went to study economics straight away from high school. And unlike in the US and the UK, in most European universities, you kind of go into a more narrow direction rather than just kind of majoring in something. So you have to kind of decide early on what you want to do. And you can change, but you kind of put on a track early on. And that was economics. So I remember, so the first in Budapest. So the first meeting with economics was like micro 101.
Yeah.
And I think my first, I guess as for many people, like the first experience that I remember is that when you study perfect everything, and then you think, wow, that can be right. And kind of this experience, again, especially in economy, that's just moving from a centrally planned economy to a market economy, right? So it's really far from equilibrium.
Right.
So that's your daily experience.
Right.
And then you go into school and then you have these perfect everything kind of models. And so I think that was the first experience that I thought, some bits are super interesting. Game theory is super interesting. I never thought about this, and that sounds like pretty cool. And then I understand, that there is oligopoly and all that, but still, the kind of the simpleness of it was striking. So that was like the first experience in school.
That was in college.
That was first year in college.
In college, you were already kind of like intrigued by economics and a little bit critical.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I think yes. I think you said both intrigued, and because you are in an econ track, you get to study, trade and macro and labor fairly early on, right? So in the second or the third year, I would have seen, the more interesting bets. But like the first year, it's pretty standard, and even though that was like, just post transition, we still got to, the variant textbook was the micro textbook, right? So still,
you used variant for
I did.
Your micro variant,
the small one,
for micro intermediate principles of micro. The thin one that's like got optimization in it. Okay, you went to a better school than me.
No, I mean, but I, that was, so I think I remember it. And then when I went to master's, I studied again the bigger one, and then that's where really, things started to make sense. But in the beginning, there were not many textbooks, right? Remember, this is just right after the transition. So, there are some textbooks, but not many. Also, people are kind of scrambling for material.
Yeah.
There are textbook translations going on.
So Varian was translated?
I'm trying to remember. I'm not. So it was for sure. I'm not sure that when I was a student, whether it was already translated or being translated, I don't remember. There's a lot of books translated. I mean, I even took part in an econometric book translation to the textbook by Maddala.
Yeah.
So that was later on. Sorry, that was a couple of years after that. So it was late 90s.
Yeah.
And then there was like a group of graduates, in sort of senior college and then early PhD, and then there was like 5 of us translating Maddala. Whether that was like a meaningful project, probably not.
Yeah.
But, it was like this wave of textbook translations.
Was in your department, since it was such a transitional regime change, were the faculty kind of like burning their lecture notes and just starting over?
Yeah.
And they were switching over to this like neoclassical paradigm?
Yeah.
What was it like for them? Could you tell that was like tons of human capital they were developing at the same time, or did they already know all this stuff?
No, I mean, some did, some were like, 2 months ahead of us, I guess, but some did, right? So there were there were already some exchanges in the very late 80s. So some people, went to the US for terms and kind of got to learn it.
Yeah.
And so they were like the pioneers, when this was happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it must have been a lot of change, and then some people were, visibly not very comfortable in this setup, in the sense that they were not doing a very good job, and then other people actually did make a switch, and they already, I mean, it was so. Although teaching must have been fairly limited, but people could have got Western textbooks in the mid to late 80s. Right. So again, Hungary was more liberal and open than other countries. So you could with difficulty, you could travel, you could get foreign books, textbooks in. So there were already some, schooling for people in the late 80s, and they were better end of the staff and faculty.
Now, what individuals do you remember just being like really impactful?
So basically, László Halpern, who was basically so later on, he was my MA thesis, and also one of my MA theses, and also one of the PhD advisors. So he gave a course at a college called Reich in the mid 90s. So I was in like second or third year on international trade and international economics, more international economics, so like exchange rates and trade. Yeah. And I think that was the thing that got me interested in, in what I ended up doing in most of my research. So
so that was in your master's program?
That was it. That was the class and the person that kind of moved me. And then I also, so first, during my undergrads, I spent a half a term at LSE, and I had a class with Tony Venables on economic geography. This was exactly the time he was writing his textbook on economic geography. So he was kind of teaching out of his manuscripts. And that was like the other influence in my interest in geography and urban economics and spatial stuff in general, and kind of the link between spatial stuff and trade stuff. I think that came from that class. So these two.
Wait, so tell me, just for the sake of the reader, listener, what about that material really just captivated you? Why do you think it was, amongst all that stuff you're learning, and all the changes happening in the world, why that material?
I don't know. I mean, I think in both courses, I think Paul Krugman's work, and you said, what are the textbooks or the material? I think, in terms of reading, I think Paul Krugman's work on a lot of things that were like broader than the simple thing that I studied earlier, but
Yeah.
like still had a solution, and you can still think about them analytically. I think some of his papers are really the ones that kind of captivated my interest, that come through both these courses, both in trade and in exchange rates, and many things from pass-through to the J curve to the oil shock to the Dutch disease, to kind of the creation of agglomeration and periphery. These were super influential.
Yeah. So you leave LSE to go get your doctorate. Where do you end up going?
I started the master's at LSE, and then I finished at CEU.
CEU. So did they have a strong tradition in economic geography international?
So I think, this was, so maybe not, so I think not at that time, to be honest, not at that time. It ended up being quite a good collection of people later on. Maybe that was when I went there, that was the beginning. Of course, at LSE they were, but at CEU, it was just kind of the beginning. I think most people were interested in, so there's a lot of transition economics.
Yeah.
There was in the 90s, there was this whole broad spectrum of studies about the transition from, communist to, or centrally planned to market economy. So there's a lot of that, and there's macro and labor, I think.
What kind of fields did that transitional economics draw on?
Say it again?
What kind of fields did that, what kind of fields and traditions did transitional economics? I mean, it's almost like by being transitional economics, it almost just seems like this is a field that may never persist, because if everybody eventually transitions, then it's just like a history field or something.
So I think, okay, so this is like a deep and philosophical issue, right? So I think, let me answer the first question. I think it's political economy. This is this would be now part of political economy.
Yeah.
It's also part of market design.
Right.
It's also partly, I don't know, production economics, if there is such, or industrial economics.
Yeah.
And then a little bit of labor market reforms. So that was it. And then, I mean, so you can, yes, on the one hand, that was a very specific field. And I used to think that this is not a field, this is just a topic.
Right.
But then, you still have centrally planned economies. You actually have economies that are becoming more and more centrally planned. Right. So in the sense that if you think about the move between how economies are organized and the study of that, I think there is more generality than that. Let me just give you one idea about this. So I think János Kornai, who was like the, kind of one of the most well-known scientists of the socialist regime, and he was very active in these years. Now, his central thesis is that the soft budget constraint is the essence of central planning. Is that there are firms of budget constraint, right? So this budget constraint.
But you said soft budget constraint?
I said soft budget constraint, yeah. So this is the idea that there are firms, and they have a budget constraint that they optimize, but this is like a soft constraint. So the state can always come in and save them, and that's going to change incentives, and that's going to change, how we think about productivity and allocation and the lack of reallocation, right? If the state can always come and save you, then you're not going to reallocate resources, right? And that's not going to be creative destruction, a lot of things. And yes,
I can almost imagine more risk taking under a situation like that.
There is no more risk taking because there's also no reward, because if there is a soft constraint, then the state will take some of the surpluses.
I see. They give and they take. I see.
Right? And so I think, if you think about this idea is more general. Yeah. Right. This was true for the whole economy in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
It may not be true for the whole economy of countries, but there are many countries where the state operates very strongly in the economy. And then companies have a diluted incentive structure.
Yeah.
And this is something that many of my colleagues are working on.
Mm. So did you end up working on these topics when you were in
No.
graduate school? What did you end up doing your job market paper on? And what was it like finding that job market paper?
I mean, so on one hand, it was a bit difficult because it was still, being in Hungary, it's still being pretty far away from stuff.
Mhm.
And, you could obviously travel, and that was very useful. And I had one of my advisor, who's now my co-author from Bocconi, he was very helpful. But still, there was some hardship in finding peers, I think. So that was like the biggest difficulty, to find peers that are interested in the same topics.
Yeah.
Just
which because
is
of the
true if
network?
you are in a small university, I think it's generally true.
Mhm.
And then I started to work. So that was kind of the difficulty. The upside was that this was the emergence of admin data in many countries. So I started to work on admin data, and I worked on FDI, and I worked on spillovers and location choice. So I did my PhD on focusing on location choice, and how firms select their site for investment, and what are the spillover effects.
Mhm.
Using Hungarian data, and that was really kind of when these admin data were first kind of made available, not just in Hungary, but I think in the world, right? So that was useful.
So you had to find that. You were a grad student, and you were looking for data.
Yes, exactly.
The admin data became available. And what was the topic on?
So the topic was the location of FDI. So it was location choice.
Okay.
And think about agglomeration and proximity to consumers, and how different types of firms make different decisions, and then how these decisions have a productivity spillover to existing companies, how this productivity spillover is heterogeneous, how some firms would benefit, and that was related to the policy debate that was very strong in kind of the mid-late 90s in Hungary, but also I think in Europe, many places, that you wanted FDI, but then once you were having it, how is it going to affect the local firms? And there was, in the early 90s, there was this massive optimism that, well, there is this massive knowledge inflow, right? That these multinationals are bringing in the know-how, and how that's going to have like this very positive effect on everybody else. And then it turned out that it's really like the top 25% of the local firms who are able to absorb all these knowledge about how to make stuff, how to export, how to benefit from kind of globalization. And then there are some firms that for whom it doesn't matter, and then there are actually firms who are losing out, who are kind of because of workers leave them, or because they're just competed out, are kind of losers of this process.
Did you find, as you were looking for that job market paper, could you just tell, sometimes there's people where they're really doing really great in the program until they have to get to that point of the finding the project, and they may not have the mentors around them, or it just might not be intuitive how to find that project. Was it a process? What was the process like for you of just moving from classwork to research?
I mean, I think because research was the more creative process, I think I enjoyed that more, and I wasn't really good in kind of transforming it into papers that have a good structure and that have like but like the creative process of coming up with ideas and working with the data and finding out something and relating to policy, I think that's something, and then going to conferences and discuss it, I think that's something that I actually like quite a bit.
Yeah. I totally identify with that. So you finish and you end up getting this first job. So where did you end up getting, what year is it at this point? And when did you, what was your first job you landed?
So let me think. It must have been 2007, 9, something like that.
Okay.
So, and that was actually my second job. So my first job was before my PhD, I worked for an investment bank in London for 2 years.
Okay. Yeah.
I've worked for Lehman Brothers, which no longer exist.
Oh, you worked for Lehman Brothers. That's cool.
And that was like 2000 to 2002.
Uh-huh.
And I was
We're the same
basically
age. I think what's your birth? What year were you born?
74.
I was born in 75. Okay. What music were you listening to in high school?
Hungarian alternative.
Hungarian alternative music.
Right. So I think Hungarian alternative. I also listen to a lot of classical music, right? Because that's kind of where I'm coming from. So I think
sure.
I really have like an multipolar musical taste, in the sense that I like David Bowie, and I also like Bach, and
Yeah.
you're not that different, but I certainly not like, I don't share your strong taste for hip hop.
Oh yeah.
Like it, but that's not. Yeah, I mean, I guess I like
They didn't have
whatever.
rap didn't make its way to communist Hungary.
So it came in right around 90. So it was MTV Yo Raps.
Oh yeah,
Remember that's something I remember. And I said, what's going on? and so I think that I also like Sondheim and musicals. And I like musicals also when kind of growing up.
Yeah.
Maybe more Weber and less Sondheim, and now it's more Sondheim than Weber, but
well, so okay, so you get this first job.
So my first job was as an investment bank, but like my second job was at the Institute of Economics that I'm still working for in Budapest.
Okay.
And that was like policy/research job, where we would work on research papers, but also kind of part of policy projects for a little bit to the government, but mostly for the European Union or for the ECB, the European Commission. So a lot of the things that I was working on was like EU level policy related stuff about trade and firm performance. And
but these weren't academic articles?
Some of them were, and some of them were more like policy stuff. And
did this fit your research?
Yeah.
This fit your research?
And there was also like a very good bunch of people. So there is also a substantial overlap between CEU and the Institute. There still is, in terms of students and faculty. But I mean, I think I did some of my best research in trade in the Institute.
Yeah.
Sure. And they were often, related to, so we would be working on comparing trade performance at the firm level across countries. And then we would find that there is a large fluctuation in your export partners, and there are so the trade literature at that time, the Melitz type of models, they were saying, you have kind of some productivity draw, and then if you're lucky, it's going to be high, and then that's going to allow you to cover the fixed cost of exporting. And then if you do that, then you're going to export. And then in data, as we're comparing, doing this policy work to compare countries, we're finding in Hungarian data that there are these short spells of trading experience at the firm level. So you would sell some stuff, but only for 1 or 2 or 3 years, and then not do it again. Yeah. And it turned out to be a a relevant academic question to think about this temporary trade and to juxtapose a different type of model to the Melitz type of model, where you can kind of have a higher variable cost and a low fixed cost, and that means that in sometimes that would be worth worth trading. And if you're not in the most productive bunch of the distribution, then this is something that's relevant for you, and you're going to do this temporary trade. And that started off as finding something weird in the data.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're describing a rich theoretical kind of background, but but then you keep referencing the data. And so you end up writing this book, Data Analysis for Business Economics and Policy, which just came out 2022. So can you sort of tell me when that book was like a glimmer in your eye? Like, what's the seeds for that book? If you go back, how far back do we have to go?
So that's, that started like 9-10 years ago. So I was still working at this institute, but I was already teaching as a visiting professor at CEU.
Actually, I just now realized, would you mind real quick telling the listener the short version of, like, what is this book that I keep referring to?
Right. So this is this data analysis textbook is an applied master's / undergraduate textbook that covers a whole spectrum of data work, starting from survey design and data collection to descriptive parts. Then in the second part, we do regression analysis, from OLS to like logit and time series. And then in the third part, it's prediction and machine learning. And then including classification and time series prediction. And then in the fourth part, it's causal analysis. So basically from dogs and diff and def to panel and event studies. Yeah. And like the idea of this textbook, is that this is written for the future practitioner. Right? So this is not a PhD textbook. We have a few of those, including yours, that are more like graduate PhD level research oriented textbook. This is for people who end up going to work with data, but not necessarily as an academic. And for them, you need to have this broad spectrum of tools and methods. Yeah. Not like super deep into math. Right. So the emphasis is on case studies and practice and how how kind of explain what you find. Right. Right. So, okay, great. It's a phenomenal book. It's also a beautiful book. It really feels wonderful. It's so glossy and has amazing graphics. I'm just curious, you come from this creative artistic background. Was that a lot of input from you, or was that from your co-author, Gábor Kézdi? So first, thanks a lot. It's nice to hear that. No, it was me, I think. And I'm going to be a bit more precise. So let me answer first your original question of how it all started. So it was like Kézdi was already at CEU. He was the head of department. And then he invited me to teach some metrics, applied metrics course. And then I was also supervising MA students. And I remember when it started, right? So it started in spring afternoon. I was having a discussion with a guy whose thesis I was supervising about whether to use random effects or fixed effects. Yeah. And that was his main question that he came to see me. And at the same time, he didn't really have an idea what he's doing, why he's doing that, and how to interpret the coefficients that he found, right? So there was the significant, not significant, goes up, goes down, and then discussion about random effects versus fixed effect. And then after this, I went up to Kézdi and I said, we are not doing something right, because this is not what the supervision and the discussion should be about. Yeah. Right. And I think that was the beginning that we need to do a better job in deeply explaining the simple stuff in data, including how to interpret OLS coefficients with great confidence, rather than talking about stuff that don't really matter outside of academia.
Right.
So that was the beginning. Your second question about the graphics. So I think it was me. We wanted to have something nice. I think I had more interest in this a little bit. And then I listened, so I thought about the color scheme, and then I listened to a presentation of Python enthusiasts on Matplotlib and how they pick how the human eyes work and how you see colors. And that's when I heard about Viridis, the color scheme that you see in the book. And then I said, okay, everything should be with this color scheme, including the cover, every graphics and everything should have like this
kind of almost purplish deep blue. And
exactly. So Viridis is a frog. And it has like different, it has colors from yellow to the aubergine to teal and blue and green. So this color scheme from like yellow to purple to dark purple is a color scheme that's also friendly for colorblind people. And actually it turns out that Kézdi is one of these 5% of people, or 6% of white males that are colorblind. This is, he used to tell me that he can't see blue and
could you see
blue
these
and red.
Colors? He could see these colors?
Yeah, because this color scheme is designed so that colorblind people can see it. It's also, if you print it black and white, you can see dark from light. And even when you show this color scheme, people's mind will just understand that purple means higher and more, and yellow means less and lower. So you can have these rankings, and you can use them as individual colors, but you can have like a heat map.
Oh, wow!
Which we do. One of my favorite graphics. We have a heat map.
It's so funny. I know I must have like thought a lot about the color. It's just that I'm not a particularly visual person, so I didn't say the words out loud, but it's like every time I looked at it, I think I must have, every time I looked at it, I just think I made a comment and go, this is a really pretty book. This is well, it's not just that, even the cover with these like random forest plots or these polynomials, or
these
little minimalistic, clean lines, lots of space. And it's just, even the way you just do some of these things, they're really original.
The cover was also designed, and these are yes. So basically, the cover pictures, like there are the 6 small pictures on the 6 small visuals on the cover, and each are kind of a simplified version of an actual graph that we have in the book. Right. So these are kind of, and then we use the graphic designers to make them look nice, but we kind of draw like how they should look, and then the graphic designer make them look like nicer.
They're gorgeous. I did not realize that I did not design the cover of my book. I can barely put clothes together that don't make me look like a fool. So this is just so amazing that you put this together.
Crazy also.
What's that?
Crazy also.
Really? So
imagine, this is like the discussions I had with publishers. So it was published by Cambridge University Press. And, the discussions I had with how the print graphic scheme corresponds to the different graphic scheme, different colors that you see on the screen.
Yeah.
Like, this is like, I remember, I think back of those discussions, I think, what was I doing? I had no idea.
What was Gábor thinking about this? He
wanted to make it pretty. So I think he wanted to make it like a college textbook, like pretty. And so he wanted, I think, so the idea to have a lot of graphs, I think that's something that he pushed for, to have a lot of graphics. Also because for practitioners, the idea of making graphs and visually telling the story is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And
that telling of a story, actually, teaching students that the research has this telling of a story element, it's funny. You're not really sure in which class you're supposed to teach that, but when you're doing data visualization, it's a lot easier because you're kind of like, the reason why this picture works or doesn't work is because of this broader thing you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there are many skills that we are not sure how and when to teach, and that includes, data wrangling or visualization, as you mentioned, and storytelling. And I think and often you would have like a econometrics theory that are there, the serious class, and then you have some applied, maybe some data visualization separately. And so people don't see that these are really together, in the sense that your data is going to tell you what you can do, and then as you are discovering it, there is this discussion that happens between you and the data and the models. And so you have to put everything together when you think about it, both as a practitioner and as an academic. And often this is like an afterthought in many programs, like the practical stuff. And that's just not good.
So so you've got this glimmer in your eye. This guy's like random effects, fixed effects, and you have this thought, I got to answer this student's question, random effects, fixed effects, but you could tell what? You could tell he's asking the wrong question, or he doesn't even know what the question is, and it's a lot clearer to you. What is it that you noticed?
So I think that he was like a smart student. He ended up doing a good dissertation. But he was just not focusing on what matters. I think that was the ultimate thing, that he's not talking about what really matters. Instead, he's talking about stuff that are of secondary importance.
Can you tell me what really explain to me like I'm 5? What matters in graduate school and what's of secondary importance?
I think it matters to understand that most of the exercises are about comparing conditional means. That's what our business is, comparing conditional means. That's the overarching business we are in. And that should be kept at the simplest way in understanding what you compare with what and how to interpret your results. And if you are able to understand, and that's more than 5-year-olds, but if you are able to understand and explain an OLS regressions with two right-hand side variables. And you know what you're doing, and you know what you measure, and that's already fantastic. And this is what you should think about, like, what is the right simple regression or conditional comparison that you should do? And then how you should work with, what is the right data for that? What is it that you can realistically ask from your data? That's 80%. And then on top of it, you can think about the details, right? I think it's at the academic level, we think the right diff in diff is uber important. And it is. At the academic level, when you have really specific questions and, super specific situations and everything, but at some lower level, to understand that diff in diff is just 4 numbers. And you may work a lot to get those 4 numbers before and after treated, untreated. I think that was the idea, that to make sure that there is a kind of a curated content, there is a core content that is drilled into people, while not wasting time on GMM. And I don't want to hurt people's feeling and effects and
we'll edit that out. Just kidding.
Let me even be stricter. So there is like 3 pages in the book about IV. 3 pages.
Right.
And the reason for that, whereas there's like 50 page about fixed effects or 80 page about fixed effects and definitive. And the reason is because practitioners are unlikely to find themselves working on a question that is given to them with data given to them, where IV is the solution.
Yeah. Right.
Right? Often we kind of create situations or try to find scenarios where we can use it.
Mm-hmm.
But for practitioners, that's not the most likely scenario.
It's
So
like
we
you
want
did
to,
back. It's like you backwards engineered the student.
yeah, it's true. We thought a lot about, so, you asked about kind of the glimmer in the eye and what happened then. And what happened then was so we first started to teach an applied course. This kind of started to grow and grow with Kézdi. And after 4 years, we said, let's what are the books we want to teach? And we couldn't really find one.
Right.
That's I guess that's many, textbook authors' experience. Yeah. They have something in their minds, and then they're trying out 10 different textbooks, and they're unhappy with either for different reasons. And don't get me wrong, I loved, I studied from Wooldridge and Angus Pischke and Greene. And I liked them all for different reasons, but they were not what we wanted to do. And then so we started to write like notes and bits and pieces and case studies, and that's how it all began.
So Kézdi, so does he approach you or do you approach him, or is it just kind of a natural thing about let's write this book?
So we have been teaching and finding materials together, and he was more kind of, so before me, so I worked in a research institute and I worked on trade. He's a labor economist, and he has been teaching classic econometrics for many years before me. And so he has been writing notes and stuff. And then I remember, we ordered our last batch of textbooks that we thought will save us. And we were I was in his office, and we were going through them and just discussing that this is not how it's going to go. And we said, so we have produced a lot of material, a lot of case studies in particular. And so shall we just say we were writing a textbook, which sounded ludicrous? And then he said, yeah, let's. And that was it.
What year is that?
So I think that was 5 years before publication. So that was 5-6 years. So that must have been like 2016, I would say.
Yeah.
15,
Did you have any ideas of what a massive project that this was going to be undertaken?
Hell no.
Yeah, as you can tell from reading it, the visualization, the in-depth, the perfection of it. It's got like no errors. The expansive code and state of art. It's just such a practical and a book you just want to look at. I mean, it's it seems like it should just be one of these books that students just have in their backpack. Yeah. I
mean, so I'm glad you say that, because our mind was that this is ideally a textbook, and this was like one condition and related to the search of the publisher that we wanted to make sure that it's not expensive.
Yeah.
$60, 50 pounds or euros. So this is not an expensive book. And that was something because we wanted people to have it. And also, like, when you go and work and you are not sure, so how should we think about selection bias, or how do you interpret this, or what do you do? And then you can kind of go back and look at it. But no, I mean, of course we had no idea, or at least I had no idea how vast it will be. It has machine learning, which I had no experience before teaching. So I kind of learned it as I was teaching the course. And I felt like, now that we discussed it, it was like my professors in '92, that I was like maybe 1 or 2 years ahead of my students. It was fairly new, coming mainstream to social sciences.
Yeah,
I'm not a computer scientist, but like one of the challenges was how to tell, something that's coming from computer science of Hashti and Tipshirani and those guys, how you explain it to social science crowd, and how to curate which type of machine learning to explain. And sure, we only talk about tabular data, right, when you have numbers as dependent variable, but still there are many ways. And the idea to have only one type of of methods, but kind of explain them in detail, how algorithms work. I think that was like a process for us as well.
So what, did you start with a table of contents, machine learning was in there, or just this thing kind of sprawl a little bit? I mean, it seems like it's got such a coherent logical structure. It seems like, and I'm now kind of getting from talking to you, I feel like you're probably very intentional and you have a real vision ahead of time of what this is. Is that?
Yes, I think it was in the, so when you know, as you know, when you talk to publishers, you want to have like a sample chapter or two, and then you want to have a table of contents. And I think basically by and large, so that was like, 5 years before finishing it, we had the table of contents that we have now. There are some, there are some minor changes in how are we going to talk about measurement error in this chapter or that chapter, and minor things within the parts. But I think this idea to have 4 equal parts about kind of data work and descriptive analysis, regressions, prediction with machine learning, and causal inference, to have equal 4 parts to also make the case that this is what you should what you should know.
A really strong opinion. When you think about it, it's like it's a much stronger opinion type of book than like what I wrote, which was like, let me just summarize the call, now that a lot of time has passed, let me summarize the 7 things, which is more of like, this is kind of like the equilibrium. Your book is like, I have an opinion.
I think so. And so as I think back of the discussions I had, so I visited a bunch of publishers and we had a discussion. And one of the reasons we went with Cambridge is because they said, you can write the 700 crazy book that you want, which is going to be your vision. We don't want to have 4 books separately or this and that. If you think that this is what, people should know, and, this is what Angry said, like the 95% of what people should know in practice. And I think that was the vision and that was the statement. And this is why we wanted like a large book, even if this is harder to sell and there are many practical problems. But yeah, that was the the statement and the strong view of what we should kind of teach for people. Suppose you have like 1 year of data, like 1 long year or maybe 2 years, and that's it. What is it that we should let you go with? And then it comes with the case studies and the coding bets and state R and Python, and it shows that at the same time you're agnostic about coding. You don't have a strong view that you should use this or that.
It seems like there should be a class like that. I have a colleague that almost teaches a class like this, that's just like research from A to Z, kind of quantitative research A to Z. It's like, it literally gets down to, the paper is going to have this, it's going to have table 1, 2, 3. Table 1 is going to look like this. Table 2 is going to look like this. Table 3, it's like all this, it's got this template. And in a way, it's like kind of got this, feeling. It's not like that, but it's sort of, basically the strong opinion of the Gábors of that it's not the only thing you need, but you do need this book.
And I think the other aspect is that you need to have a strong. So the other thing I think in the book that was a lot of work in you is not using academic papers, but rather developing case studies that look and smell like real life problems. So what it means is that you start with kind of raw data, and then there are parts of the code that kind of prepares the data so that when students see it in real life, right, it's not like nice and formatted and everything works. And then there is a right way, right? The other is that there is no like right way of solving a problem. You can do this, you can do that. This has this advantage, that advantage. So to have this kind of constructive skepticism that you approach things, that you want to show something, but there is some uncertainty around which is the best method. There is no like, in school, you often learn that this is the way to do things.
And what's great, I think that this is the trend in the books now. I mean, I think probably you and I grew up on the same kinds of books. There really wasn't any code. and they're
Yeah.
really like, there was like data, there was data, but you might not, a lot of our classes would be just theoretical classes. Mine were, so it's kind of like ironic, it's a econometrics class, and I might not never have to actually do anything in the class that's requiring opening up anything. And here you have Stata R Python code. I mean, I guess that's like, and you've got these wide, it's a wide book, so you can put in dual columns and all kinds of stuff, but it really seems like it's not just covering a lot of stuff, it's really meant for a lot of people.
I mean, I hope so. And so Kézdi would say that econometrics is too important to be taught by econometricians.
Okay.
And I'm kind of going to hurt again people, but there is, so there is exaggeration, and in the sense that it's important that econometrics is also taught by practitioners or applied people,
right?
Rather than, and then that means less asymptotics,
yeah.
and more just interpretation and thinking about what to use.
Yeah.
And so I'm certainly not saying that econometricians shouldn't, but I'm just saying that in addition to that,
right,
you should let applied people like I guess you and me to talk about these stuff.
Yeah, right. Let 1,000 flowers bloom.
Sure.
Well, so your Gábor Kézdi, he was a major mentor to you, is that right?
That's correct. I mean, he as I mentioned, he has been teaching econometrics long before. And he studied in Michigan, and he was like one of these people early on in the 90s to come back and kind of have a large following in teaching metrics the American way. And I think he had this very strong vision of focusing on, if I don't believe your simple stuff,
right,
I'm going to have a hard time believing your complicated stuff.
Exactly.
And you must know your data. If I ask you, so what does this variable exactly measure? You cannot just say, well, this is, labor cost. So what exactly? Right? I think so in that sense, he had an influence on me and my peers and colleagues.
That's really interesting. You can that helps kind of bring together the philosophy. I mean, even the back of the book, when you've got these, you got Josh Angrist and you got David Card and Kerwin Charles, clearly know their econometrics, but when you think of these people, that's careful, applied people, that Princeton tradition of just like figuring out where the variation is coming from, being very explicit, not, kind of moving away from the magic of econometrics, magical thinking econometrics.
Yeah.
So Gábor, Kézdi, he passed away. When did that happen, and how did that impact you?
So, I mean, yes, he did. And he basically passed away, like, I would say 2 months after the publication. So he kind of lived to hold the book in his hand. He was just a bit older than the two of us. And, it was a hard experience to kind of finish the book while he was pretty sick, and he worked till so the last thing, so when the book came out in May 2021, and there were like practice questions at the end, and like 1 month before his death, he finished a 100-page solution manual to the practice questions.
Oh, wow.
Right? So that's really that says a lot.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's I think we are grateful that he could hold his hand. Obviously,
he got to hold a copy of the book. Did he see?
Exactly.
He saw the color.
Yeah, he saw the colors, and we had like a webinar, because remember it was still COVID. So we had a webinar introducing the book, and then.
What a journey that was for you. That whole thing must have been bittersweet, just end it that way.
I mean, it was, and I mean, I try to separate talking about the book of his passing, because I don't want it to be like a sad story. But I mean, it's really his, magnum opus, and maybe more than mine. And I when I see the book, picked up in India and China and Australia and faraway places, I wish he could see his ideas going far, far away. But
well, so now that you've written this, we're at the top of the hour, so just want to kind of conclude. Now that you've written this book, how do you think your career is different now, having done this? What about, how does your sense of yourself and the sense of what your ambitions and goals and what you want to accomplish, how is it different having written the book?
I think it's a very good question, and I should think more about this. I mean, the book is out, so I've, in the past year, it's more back to research, and it's more regular. I still, there is still some work in kind of PR, and then code maintenance, and preparing the distant second edition. It's not something you would not know, right? So there's that bit. Yep. I think it changed my life, certainly, that I'm much more confident about metrics than I used to be. So I actually learned a lot during writing it, and I've become more pedantic about some stuff and more relaxed about other stuff, more pedantic about basics and more relaxed about complicated stuff. So I think it had this this impact on me.
Yep.
Maybe that's the most important. But it's it's a lot of work, as you and other authors know. It's way too much. It's way more than you would think. It takes a lot of time away from research, so you're going to have like a gap in your CV in terms of research. But at the same time, it's an impact that is incomparable to a research paper, unless you are like a super highly ranked, you're a David Autor or Carr, then your research could be interesting and could have some impact in academia, but it's going to be limited.
Yeah,
that's, I think, for most people, you do interesting stuff, you may have some impact on policy, but like limited. I think writing textbooks have potentially, a different kind of impact, and I think I enjoyed that possibility, and I'm proud of it and happy about this, and tend to forget all the hard work, copy editing 700 pages and playing with the axes. I thought that in hell I'll probably be asked to do histograms and to make sure that how that the histograms in R and theta look alike. This is what I'll be doing in hell.
Well,
so
I think you're like a perfectionist who actually completes the work and gets it made. Usually the perfectionist can get stuck, and you delivered.
But I'm not.
Beautiful product.
I'm not but I'm not a perfectionist, unfortunately. I think I'm more like an idea guy. I think Kézdi was better in so most of the first draft and the first version of sentences was written by him rather than by the two of us, to have like a unique language. So the voice that you hear is mostly his. I think the case studies are mostly mine, but the metrics is mostly his. And so I'm not a perfectionist at all. And we had a text development editor who happens to be my wife, and she helped to make sure, like 2 years also of her life, to make sure that when we say in the text 5%, it's also 5% in table 5. That's the hardest part. And that's not me, Scott. That's not me.
Boy, you hit the jackpot. Man, you just nailed this book. You just nailed it. I have this thing where I say, and I can't remember if this is where I read this. I think I read that, in the United States, Michael Jordan is considered to be the best basketball player, but there's a best of the second best basketball players. And I think I read that Dennis Rodman is considered to be the best of the second best basketball players. And I kind of feel like this idea of the textbook versus this companion book kind of has that feel. It's like the best textbook is whatever, right? Like whatever the best textbook is. But I think this is one of the best of the second best books, meaning like this is the book that should be on every syllabus. They should be on every econometric syllabus. It should be on every field, every micro field. It should be in the data science, terminal data science master's programs. This needs to be a thumbed, worn out copy. It's the kind of book that you just will consult, and it's the best one on the market.
I mean, I hope so. I have to tell you that even when we were writing it, I was constantly looking at the development of your textbook. And I was constantly afraid that we're going to be late, and then because yours is so good, obviously, is that, and compared it to, and then that how is this new brand of books coming out at the same time? And I think at the same time, we are a little bit competitors, but at the same time, I think we have grown the pie together. Right?
Totally, yeah.
That's the way I think about it, as that we have, because so I think this new breed of textbooks, it's not necessarily.
Well, they're so cheap, you just get both of them. I mean, it's like they're so cheap, you get both of them. You flip through them, you get something from some stuff and you get something from other stuff. But this book,
yeah, I agree.
You don't get any machine learning from my book. You don't get any of this. Like, I mean, I think we're both trying to provide practical guidance, but this kind of going from the foundations of description, because mine's so much your fourth part.
Yeah.
This whole 1 to 3 is completely missing, and it's critical. I know, even here at Baylor, I teach the causal inference classes, and it's like causal inference is necessary, but not sufficient for doing research. And this is a lot closer to necessary and sufficient. I think this takes a person on a big journey.
Yeah, but I mean, there is a lot of complementarity. I mean, I would tell, my students, if you want to learn more about the causal part, go and consult Scott's book. And then, I didn't cover ID and IV and RDD and so you should go and learn more of that. And I think one of the reasons we can do that is because there is some shared language, and shared understanding that you want to think kind of structure about causality, and it's not like magic econometrics. It's more like thinking it, and Dog's going to help you to some extent.
Yep.
And whether you tend to believe in some extreme version of using DAX, fine, but there is some version that you want to use, and that's more important than fancy econometrics number 5. And I think that's shared in some of the new books, and I think that's great.
Yep. Well, highly recommend people get it. Data Analysis for Business, Economics, and Policy by Békés and Kézdi. It's fantastic, and I think it's for everybody. Business, econ, policy. It's for everybody.
There you go, in the title.
That's in the title. Well, it's so nice to meet and talk in person.
It was wonderful.
I can't wait to get home and pull out my deep purple and green book and flip through it again. My glossy.
I appreciate it, and it was very nice meeting you after all the Twitter discourse. It's just nice, and thanks a lot for the talk.
Okay, bye, Gábor.
Bye.
Gotta see us through.